Uncharted is a movie. Thanks for coming. But seriously, after over 10 years of uncertainty, let's take a quick second to celebrate the fact that this movie got made and actually includes characters from the game series. Okay, now that that's over, I have some good news and some bad news. Now, you may be surprised to learn this, but movies based on successful video game franchises have a sordid history. And while Uncharted is nowhere near a groundbreaking game changer by any means, I will give it this. There are far worse video game adaptations out there. If you come into this movie as a casual fan, hoping for a popcorn flick that will give you brief Indiana Jones vibes, then you won't be too disappointed. As long as you can keep your brain turned off, or at least down, for the majority of the 2-hour runtime. However, if you are looking for a movie that delivers a satisfying story involving the characters that built this franchise, well then, I have some bad news. Now, brothers and sisters, the time is upon us to dissect this film to discover what exactly went wrong and how it can be fixed in time for the inevitable sequel. So if any of you initiates have snuck in here without watching the film first, you have about 15 seconds to get the hell out of here before spoilers rain down on you like something that rains on things. For those uninitiated, I'll leave you with this. Watch this movie with low expectations. Catch a matinee if you can. Maybe sneak in your own candy. Alright, let's get into it.
Oh, crap!
Let's begin with the cast, starting with our main character, Nathan Drake. Check that. Nathan Parker, or Peter Drake. Tom Holland doesn't play Nathan Drake in this movie, at least not the one that we are shown in the video games. He plays Peter Parker. Now, this is not meant to be a knock on Tom Holland. He plays a great Peter Parker in this movie, and I do feel that he is putting in effort, at least compared to the next person on our list. But when you watch this movie, the way Nathan Drake moves, the way he behaves and acts, the way he speaks, it just doesn't feel anything like the video game character that we're accustomed to. Early on, there is a scene where what we will call Nathan Parker looks a lot like video game Drake. It's the one where they are there to steal the cross, and he's hanging from the chandeliers and all that. That feels very authentic. That feels like the games. But later, we see all these crazy dodge motions. He does some crazy leaps over a bar and dives through a perfectly tiny square secret hatch. He does all kinds of cool stuff, getting up to and jumping off of the plane. Things that just really didn't feel authentic to the character. While Nathan Drake did some amazing stuff, even his running mechanic in the game, his running animation, he's stumbling, he's tripping. It was sort of a savant. He was brilliant and anxious and really freaking lucky. He wasn't a superhero. He was just a dude in a khaki shirt and jeans who has the highest body count of all time, which leads me to my next point. This is Nathan Parker, not Nathan Drake, because this Nathan Drake would never have a body count. This Nathan Drake won't even leave Chloe behind when he has the proper coordinates. Now, I like that he finally learned from the character whose only character trait apparently was just going to screw you over 100% of the time. But Nathan Drake, especially an early Nathan Drake, probably would have run off and made that decision on his own, whether Chloe had betrayed him or not. I don't think that this is authentic. And also, if we start him off a little on the grungier side, there's more room for this character to grow as we anticipate future sequels. But I can't sit here and complain about Nathan all day, so let's move on to our next culprit, because as many issues as I may have had with Nathan Parker, it pales in comparison to Marky Sullivan. Mother of God, how anyone could have cast this man in a video game movie after what he did to Max Payne is beyond me. This dude does not play Victor Sullivan. He plays Mark Wahlberg.
You can't keep me cooped up in here, okay? I am a peacock. You gotta let me fly.
And it's not very good. To give credit where it's due, the interactions between Tom and Mark, so between Nate and Sully, they have some good banter, they have some good back and forth, but again, it doesn't feel like Nate and Sully's banter. It feels like Mark Wahlberg and Peter Parker banter is what it feels like. There are also really no redeeming qualities to this version of Sully throughout the movie until the very end. You're led to believe that he's kind of some scumbag who dicked over Nate's brother. There isn't any of that history that the video games, which didn't lay out for you right away, but they build into it with Uncharted 3, and there's a backstory here, and they just don't want to use it, which is fine. It's a reinterpretation, I understand that. However, there's just no character here. Once again, like we said before, the characters are flat. There's no arc. The only instance of change is at the very end when you have that clearly marked bag of gold that you just know is going to be Mark Wahlberg's token of choice later, that he finally sacrifices to save old Nate Drake. It falls flat. It doesn't. You don't feel anything. There's been no growth. Again, this character was one note the entire time, and it just wasn't enough for me. I really wish they would have cast just about anyone else as Victor Sullivan in this role. But again, I could shit on Mark Wahlberg for a half an hour and call it its own video. So let's just move on to the rest of the cast. Starting with Antonio Banderas, who, in my opinion, was awesome. I've heard differing opinions. I would like to hear your differing opinion in the comments, should you have one. But to me, Banderas was about the only enjoyable actor for the very limited time he was on the screen. He felt like a decent Uncharted villain who was just immediately ripped away, but we will get to those writing issues in a minute. Now, to be fair, the character Banderas played was not perfect. I felt that he repeated himself virtually every time he was on screen, but at least he was chewing the scenery and giving me something to be less bored when he was on screen. Speaking of boring, Braddock, our eventual main bad gal, was a bit of a block of wood at times, I thought. I just don't have much to say or critique here that I wouldn't get into in the writing of the character. I don't know if this is the actress's fault. I don't believe it is. Maybe it's the director's fault. I believe it's a combination of the way the character was written and the way the actress was directed. You've heard me say it before. I will say it again occasionally. I don't really believe in bad acting, with exception. I believe in bad directing. But let's move on to other characters. Chloe, again, I mentioned this briefly earlier. She has the same flaw that most of these characters have, which is they have one note and they play it a lot and they play it too much. Chloe is just going to backstab you. That's about it. There's not much more character development there. We are missing Nate's partner in crime from the video games. So I thought maybe Chloe would fill that role, or at least be sort of like, to pull from Spider-Man again, I thought maybe this could be sort of our love interest before we bring MJ into the fold. But no, I don't think that's the way they're going to go. Maybe. We'll see. They didn't really do much of anything with her, just casting her off for the final act. So let's just get into the writing, because I have been putting it off for long enough. So much of what needs to be said about the aforementioned characters can't be properly articulated without discussing the way they were written. So indulge me, if you will, while we merge these 2 points together. These characters don't feel right. We talked about it with Sully and Nate and Chloe and Sam. And just in general, this doesn't feel like an Uncharted story. Not even an origin story. These characters don't feel like the characters that we all came here for, which is why I am confused. This movie didn't need to be an Uncharted movie. It could have been anything. It could have been that Matthew McConaughey movie in the middle of the desert. It didn't need to be attached to a franchise. You could have just said, hey, we're gonna do a bootleg Indiana Jones. And we would have been fine with it, especially those of us who watch these kind of movies on $5 night. Why you had to drag a beloved gaming franchise into this without paying any attention to the qualities of the actual characters is beyond me. But the bad writing isn't limited to just a bad writing for an Uncharted game. For instance, killing off your main villain to establish a henchman as the new head honcho could work in a movie series. I think ideally it works better if it happens maybe in movie 2 of a series, or at the very least if more time has been spent establishing the henchman, so that way when there is the handing over of the torch, so to speak, it feels earned, and the henchman fills that role as the new boss, and the audience feels that with it. It makes sense. It clicks with them, that because there's been a journey throughout the story, or at least a couple of scenes that have been dedicated to the growth of this character, so that it feels that they have leveled up. You know, all of that would make sense. What doesn't make sense is having Antonio Banderas and company get on this plane, and as they're on their way there, Braddock walks up, cuts the throat, and just, oh, I'm the boss now. You've barely heard anything from me. Just had a couple of things that other characters have referenced about me, but you, the audience, don't know much. And then just another nitpick here. I get that you're a PG-13 movie, but if you can't show blood from a cut throat, then stop zooming in on it. I'm not asking you to put the, right amount of blood that would make it look realistic. I'm just asking you to stop showing it to me if you're not gonna do that. It just made it look like a cartoon, and not in the good way. Not the good kind like you want. Getting back to the plot twist, the Braddock taking over as the main antagonist. The way it played, it was a nice surprise. I'm sure not many people saw that coming, but at what cost? This goes back to the Alfred Hitchcock school of thinking with the bomb under the desk, where, yes, if you have characters talk for 5 minutes and suddenly a bomb explodes, they are surprised, but that doesn't last very long. It's just, ooh, a loud noise, what the hell just happened? What's it, 30 seconds? But if you show the bomb under the chair, and then you have these two people talk about baseball for 5 minutes, then boom, that's tension. That's got the people invested, so when that bomb finally does explode, it's It's stretched out. So just again, everyone who's ever been in a creative writing class has probably heard these things. So it's disappointing to see beginner level mistakes for movies that are basically studio made. But I mean, what do we expect at this point, right? As it stands, this movie killed off its most interesting character and what ultimately could have been, if nothing else, a memorable villain, cast it aside for what felt like a nameless henchman. Braddock is the character's name, and I do hope that the inevitable sequel casts a more video game faithful villain, because Uncharted has some of the most charismatic, entertaining villains in video games. There's just so much there. Just use what's there. To wrap it up on this part, the major set pieces that were done have all been done better in the game before. So I don't understand why you would do that. Either do something new, maybe do something that's a callback as a smaller set piece, but don't have all your major set pieces just be callbacks to the video game. Especially when the video game makes it look better, and due to its interactive nature is just going to be a better experience. You're not going to be able to compete with it. You're just not going to be able to, so it doesn't really make sense to do all of that, does it? Another nitpick. I understand having product placement in your movie. I do. I get it. This movie probably needed the budget. But let's not have a major third act scene take place in a pizza chain if we can avoid it. We should always avoid it. Writers, there's a point we have to just say no, okay? Do that shit early in the movie. Get your Papa John scene out early. Don't have it be a part of the final scene. And if your argument is going to be that it was part of the juxtaposition that, oh, this was once the ancient world and now it's so modern, you can do that without a product placement. There was a way to have done it that would have better suited the story. It wouldn't have broken the suspension of disbelief and just ultimately inserted comedy when it wasn't a good time for it in the movie. So it's enough with what this one did wrong. How the hell are we going to fix this next one? Because don't look now, guys, but this movie's doing okay in the box office, and I think there's going to be a second one. When the next writing team sits down to pen a sequel, there's a few things they should keep in mind. Beginning on what my notes say is building on what worked. Having been here for about a half an hour, I can't really recall what that was. So let's see. Keep letting Tom Holland be an action man. The interactions between Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg are good. I think there should be an emphasis on making these characters feel more genuine, as I've mentioned. But their banter is good and can be worked into, again, this interpretation of the source material. I would bring in the missus. I am, of course, referring to Elena from the video games. I think while we're talking about leading ladies, there's some opportunity with Chloe. I think that's a well-casted role, and they can do a lot more than they did. So, great opportunity there to improve the sequel. I would also establish a villain and build them up to the third act. Groundbreaking stuff, I know. I'm not even going to elaborate on that because I think everyone understands what I mean. And I would improve the soundtrack. So, one of the other nitpicks I had about this was there weren't a lot of referential moments to the video game soundtrack. There was one, just like there was that one on-the-nose Nolan North cameo that was not great. But if you want to be nostalgic, if you want to do some reference stuff. Maybe do less of it in the set pieces and do more of it in the soundtrack, because I think this soundtrack was very generic. I don't remember a single track from this, and the best thing they could do is insert some of the memorable tracks from the video games. When it's all said and done, I don't hate this movie. I don't like it either. I felt nothing, really. I just feel cold. Anyway, considering the other movie adaptations of major game franchises, I'll consider this a win in that sense. And in that sense alone. If you are looking for an hour and a half of mindless fun, then check this out at your theater's next discount night. But if you are a fan of the Uncharted series or good movies with well thought out characters and plots, maybe skip this one. You know what? Why don't you just play your favorite Uncharted game instead? I think that's what I'm gonna do. Thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe if we did anything to brighten your day, or give me a big fat dislike and a hateful comment on why I was wrong about your favorite video game based movie. Be on the lookout for future reviews. We are making a video for every movie that I watched this year, so God help me. Up next will likely be The Matrix Resurrection. That script has been done for a long time. We also have The Batman coming up, and just so much more. So be sure to click that notification bell if you want to know when the next one comes out, and until then, just have yourself a wonderful day.
I guess it's kind of illegal, but I would basically say to crew members, like, what would you like to drink? I was really making drinks and just slyly, like, giving them to the crew, and I was the bartender. It was amazing.